A baby boy is born, bringing hope to a troubled country, to a troubled land, bringing the hope that the oppression and the darkness that is crushing everybody will soon be lifted. No, not the baby in Downing Street. We are here today looking at Matthew chapter 2. Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, says Matthew at the start of this, Matthew 2, verse 1, during the reign of King Herod. About that time, some wise men from eastern lands arrived in Jerusalem asking, "Where is the newborn King of the Jews? We saw his star in the east, and we have come to worship him." King Herod was deeply troubled, deeply disturbed when he heard this, as was everyone in Jerusalem. He called a meeting of the leading priests and teachers of religious law and asked, "Where is the Messiah supposed to be born?" "In Bethlehem in Judea," they said, "for this is what the prophet wrote. And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are you not least among the ruling cities of Judah? For a ruler will come from you who will be the shepherd for my people, Israel." Then Herod called for a private meeting with the wise men, and he learned from them the time when the star first appeared. Then he told them, "Go to Bethlehem and search carefully for the child. And when you find him, come back and tell me so that I can go and worship him too." After this interview, the wise men went their way, and the star they had seen in the east guided them to Bethlehem. It went ahead of them and stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were filled with joy, and they entered the house and saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasure chests and gave him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. When it was time to leave, they returned to their own country by another route, for God had warned them in a dream not to return to Herod. So here we are, a well-known event. It seems like a lifetime ago, doesn't it, since we were celebrating Christmas and we were able to be out and about to celebrate that festival. These events in this chapter are well-known, part of the Christmas story. Around it, of course, has built up some kind of mythology and tradition, things that we don't necessarily see in the Bible account. For example, we are simply told that these are wise men. In fact, magi, the Greek word there, is also the same, it's also the word for magician today. So as likely in terms of their study of the stars to be studying them as astrologers, as astronomers, that there's an engagement with superstition and religious beliefs, a far cry from the God that we meet in the Bible. And yet God speaks to them and reveals himself in his place maybe we wouldn't expect him to, but just the right place for them. But no mention of kings. There are two kings in this chapter. We will come to them later, but not the three kings from the east, simply magi. We have tended to assume that, and that's what happens. We assume that there's three of them, their status from the apparent wealth of the gifts that they bring. But there's no reason why they shouldn't have had gold and frankincense and myrrh if they've been paid those things for their services. We don't know the amounts of them. And just because there's free gifts doesn't mean to say that that means that there are free people. They could have each brought a mixture of the gifts. Or they could have all clubbed in together to bring one set of gifts together. We tend to assume that this is a few years on from when Jesus was born. Two possible reasons for that. One, that they're in a house, although I would argue that when you look at Luke's account, actually he is describing a room in the house rather than a separate stable. And secondly, the fact that later Herod will call for the death of all the children under the age of 2. But of course, that could be precautionary. And so there's no reason to suggest that this is later. This could have been very close to the time of his birth and the angels and the shepherds. But that's uncertain. But definitely this is something happening whilst Jesus is very young, under 2 years old. We're simply told in the account that Jesus was born in Bethlehem during the reign of Herod, and that around about that time, roughly about that time, these magi from the east come, possibly from Mesopotamia, from Iraq, maybe a bit further afield, to Iran, or maybe a little bit closer from modern day Saudi Arabia. But they turn up, and in that sort of comedic farce that you get in plays. My wife loves a lot of the Shakespeare farce, that comes with the sort of the mixing up of twins and that kind of thing. But it happens in everyday life, doesn't it? We get into muddles, we get confused, we get the wrong information, there's misunderstanding. I was just reading, a little side point here, I saw a link to a clipping from the Telegraph and Argus, the local newspaper in Bradford, back from 1939. And the person writes, this actually took place in a Bradford warehouse. Bert, a wool sorter, was bragging to his workmates about his extensive library. The gaffer, a well-read man, entering the warehouse and hearing him say that he knew Shakespeare, Scott, Emerson, etc., asked him if he knew Aristotle. Bert scratched his head a little, then said, Nay, I don't know Harry, but I do know his brother Jimmy, Jimmy Stottle. I know him well. That was sent in by N. Hargreaves, who was at 56 Duckworth Terrace, Bradford. There you go. Easy to get a mistake and get some confusion. And in that farce, they end up not at Bethlehem, but in Jerusalem. That's understandable. That's where you expect to meet the king. And they arrive and they say, a king is born, not the heir to the throne, but the king himself is born. And there is Herod. Herod is the king in Jerusalem. He's never been born as the king. He had to go and persuade the Roman rulers to appoint him as a king. But a king that is born a king is a legitimate heir to David. Herod appears to go along with things. He's at first deeply distressed and troubled by this, a king. And he asks the religious leaders to come and tell him where the king will be born. Without any sense of kind of emotional interest or engagement or curiosity, they give the intellectual answer. They turn up the Old Testament, a book of Micah 5 verse 2, that says he's going to be born in Bethlehem, because the prophets said that this is where the ruler will come from, that will be the shepherd of my people Israel. The book of Micah is written about the same time as Isaiah, sometime between 740 and 687 BC, so 700 years before Jesus. And during the reigns of people like Hezekiah and Uzziah, Micah prophesies that armies from the north will come and they will attack and they will destroy the city, and they will make the land into a wasteland, and they'll take the people captive. And he speaks out against false prophets at the time who are saying, no, it's going to be fine, it's going to be okay. And he says, you don't know what you're talking about. You're not talking from God. And you will be judged for your false prophecy. This land no longer belongs to you. But as well as describing the coming exile, Micah, like Isaiah, promises return to the land. And he says, you're going to be led out of captivity. A ruler will emerge who will lead you back in triumph. Well, the people had come back from captivity, but that chosen ruler, that Messiah, had not arrived. The man from Bethlehem, the descendant of David. Remember, Bethlehem is David's family home. And so they'd had governors, they'd had rulers, but then eventually the land had fallen under the crushing rule of Greece and then Rome. So the feeling was that those prophecies were not really fulfilled, not really done with yet. So they're still waiting for this ruler that matches this prophecy. So Herod sends the wise men off to find Jesus and says, come back and tell me so I can go and worship him too. But we've already picked up the hint. He's disturbed. The ruling elite with him are disturbed and traumatized by what they've heard as well. That, oh, no, there's no way that Herod wants to go to worship Jesus. His plan is to kill, to remove the rival. Well, God sets them back en route again. The revelation of Scripture and the return of the star that had been the sign in the east take them to Bethlehem, and there they worship Jesus. They open their treasures, they give him gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Fascinating, isn't it? You know, we often sing hymns, if I were a wise man, I would do my part. What can I give him? Give him my heart. And we can get locked into this idea that the worship that we bring is something that God needs. And I've got to bring something to please him, to make him happy. But think about it. No matter whether the gifts were token and small or extravagant, to the creator of the universe, to the Lord of everything, these are just stocking fillers, aren't they? Some coins, some smellies. Because he already has everything. Oh no, we don't give to God something great and wonderful that he needs in a aim to win his heart. He has already won my heart. He has already loved me. He's the one that showers his blessings out to us. And even my worship, my enjoying God, it's only giving back a small part of what he already owns and what he has given me and you. And so they arrive to worship. They're warned, and so they don't go back to Herod. You see, the point is this. Herod sees Jesus as a rival king, a rival for attention and affection and loyalty. But this is not a rivalry of equals. Herod's plans are thwarted. Herod cannot defeat this rival. Jesus is no pretender to the throne that can be crushed. Jesus is the true king. Herod is the rival, and a puny, insignificant, unequal rival at that. Christ wins out. Christ must have their affection and their loyalty, and Herod will be defeated. So we talk about rivals for our affection. Idols. Herod was a rival distracting the wise men away from Jesus, seeking to threaten Jesus. Well, he couldn't threaten or rival Jesus, but he was certainly able to distract for a bit. But even that distraction failed because God's word, God's revelation won out and drew them to where they should be. Who or what is the rival for your affection? Who or what distracts you from worshipping Jesus? You know, your idols cannot win. The things you fear that have become your idols, the things you've put your trust in, the things that you have valued more than Jesus, they must relinquish that authority and power. They cannot hold power in your life. So come to him today. Turn away from idols. Put aside the rivals, give them up, not because there's a danger that they can defeat Christ, but because they must lose in the end. Give him your loyalty, your affection, your praise. Don't turn away from him.